The situation in the 1970s was much different. We had a very cloistered economy. We weren't importing cheap products from China. And 25% of the workforce was unionized. Today, it's probably about 12% of the workforce is unionized, and half of that is government unions. So the union pressures for wage increases is not as high as it was back then. We also don't make as much as we used to because we now import so many things. It's a different economy than it used to be. We also were not energy independent then. Europe is not energy independent, but we are largely energy independent, so we're not as dependent on foreign oil prices. So it's a different situation than we had then, and I suspect that the inflation that we have now will not go away for a while. I hired, as a young man, to join my firm, a guy named Jay Powell. And I thought he was a nice young man. I didn't know what would happen to him. He left the firm after a number of years, and I thought, okay, maybe I'll never hear from him again. I'll see him somewhere in a restaurant maybe. And now he's chairman of the Fed. He's got a very, very, very difficult job because they missed the boat on inflation. Clearly, they said it was transitory when it's obviously more than that. But as we learned from Paul Volcker and other people, it takes a longer time to get inflation out of the system than get it into the system. And now I think the Fed has got to keep going with ratcheting up interest rates for a while until we get into something that Jay Powell can't say publicly. We need inflation. We need the unemployment rate to go to 5 or 6% before you're likely to see inflation go down. And he can't publicly say that. He hints at it, but he can't say it publicly.
So look, I'm so far off script. I'll never be invited back. I promise you. But let's just state that one way we can bring inflation down is to, of course, raise rates and crush housing, crush autos, crush any high-cost capital good investment that corporate America would make because the cost of money just goes so high. But what might be the fiscal or government regulatory responses that would help to build a bridge to a better future without having to crush unemployment numbers from low threes to mid fives? Like, what are alternatives to just putting people on the street?
If I knew that answer, I'd be in Iowa and New Hampshire because, there's no easy answer to that. The truth is we have $30 trillion of debt now in the federal government, more or less, $30 trillion. You can't borrow that much more without, I think, fueling inflation. We injected $5 trillion into the economy to deal with COVID, and that had an inflationary impact as well. There's no easy answer, and that's why Jay Powell has to be careful what he says because he can't say, look, if we have a recession, it's going to be bad, but it's the only way to get rid of high inflation. And that's probably the only formula we have. Since 1960, every time the Fed has raised interest rates as a way to cure inflation, in every one of those instances except one, the result was a so-called hard landing or recession. When I worked in the White House for President Carter, Carter was running for re-election, and he said, he obviously didn't want to have a recession. Well, we had high inflation. We were going to have interest rates going up because of Paul Volcker. And the inflation advisor went out into the White House press briefing room and said, I think it's likely we'll have a recession. Well, Carter hauled him into the Oval Office and said, don't use the R word. It scares people. I'm running for re-election. And the man said, Fred Kahn, what am I supposed to say? We're likely to have a recession. He said, you can say that, but just don't use the R word. So from then on, he said, I think we're heading into a banana. And he used the word banana because he knew reporters wouldn't put that in the headline. But the truth is, we're likely to have a banana. It might be soft, and it might be soft. But when the Great Recession happened, it was pretty serious, and we had dislocations in the economy, as you know. And now I suspect if we have a banana, probably more modest than it was before. But it's hard to avoid.